Good morning, Central. Thanks for tuning in this morning as we start off our day together opening up God's Word. I'm going to share an interesting passage in 2 Kings chapter 17. If you'd like to open up there with me, I'll be starting in verse 32 here in just a moment. What I'm about to read is a description of the fault of the Israelites. You know, the ones who God rejected, the ones who were disloyal. And what I find fascinating about this is not that they stopped worshiping God, but that they added on other gods. So it wasn't that they stopped worshiping God and stopped doing the sacrifices. That didn't seem to be the issue that God had with them. The real issue is a little bit more specific than that. So 2 Kings chapter 17, starting in verse 32. They worshipped the Lord, but they also appointed all sorts of their own people to officiate for them as priests in the shrines of the high places. They worshipped the Lord, but they also served their own gods in accordance with the customs and nations from which they had been brought. And all the way down in verse 41 again. Even while these people were worshiping the Lord, they were serving their idols. And to this day, their children and grandchildren continue to do as their ancestors did. The issue for the Israelites in this passage is not that they're not worshiping God. The issue is that they are also worshiping other gods. So let me say this just plainly and just kind of concisely what I hope to communicate here for us this morning. In a world of competing gods, let the true God alone be your Lord. I'll say that again because I really want us to catch this morning. In a world of competing gods, let the true God alone be your Lord. See, the issue is not that we don't worship God. And for many people, especially if you're listening to this video, it's not a matter of, well, I do or I don't worship the Lord. That's really not my greatest fear, even as a pastor for my own people that I watch over here in Missouri. No, my greater fear and the thing that I watch out for even more is for when people worship God on Sunday, and Sunday afternoon to Monday into Tuesday, the other gods that are competing for their attention, the other desires, grab and demand that we worship them as well. Philippians 3, just for example, one of the descriptions that Paul gives of the people who are not servants of God, he says that their God is their stomach. And that word, their stomach, it doesn't just mean our physical, belly. It means our will, our desires, our impulses is their God. In other words, you can live a life where you are worshiping God, and that is good, but you're also worshiping your own appetites. And if I read and understand anything from this passage, which is repeated again in Zephaniah 1:5, it's repeated of the story of Solomon, it's all throughout the Psalms. It's that it is a good thing to worship the Lord, but it's also important to remember that we are called to worship Him alone, to give our lives and devotion to Him alone. And some of Satan's greatest work is not stopping us from worshiping Jesus, but from adding things that we worship throughout the week. So here's what I'd like you to do. I did this myself. So it'd be the night before. I did this with my wife, Mallory. I'd like you to find somebody who you know very well, who can look into your lives and help you with this. And I want you to simply ask this question. What do you think in me is a temptation for me to worship as a God? So what is it in my life that I am tempted to make my God to worship alongside God. What is it that can become my idol? And ask someone this, and of course examine your own heart, but don't just rely on yourself to determine your own faults. That's nonsense in a Christian community. But seek out people, and I really do want you to do this, and that's why I did this myself and why I'm asking you to do it as well. Seek out somebody or some people who can look into your life and say, yeah, that is at least a temptation for it to become an idol in your life. And at all costs, only worship the Lord. See, the problem of the Israelites was not that they didn't worship God, it's that they worshiped other gods alongside him. The gods that are at war for your worship are demanding you to worship them. So which God are you going to serve? I want to close today just with a passage from 1 Corinthians chapter 8, speaking to this very point. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, and I believe starting in verse 4. So then, about eating food sacrificed to idols, we know that an idol is nothing at all in the world, and that there is no God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things come, and for whom we live. And there is but one Lord. The ancients, whenever they were coming up, so to speak, with the gods, they didn't just sit down and say, well, we're going to create a god of Aphrodite for sexuality. We're going to create a god for mammon, for money, god of war, Ares, and so forth and so forth. No, what they did was much more subtle and much more brilliant. They found powerful forces in the world, and they said, aha, that must be a god because it has such great power. In modernity, in the modern age, we worship those ancient gods in the same way. Our society does. People in our society worship those gods in the same way. They just no longer call them gods. But here's my challenge for us today. Seek out the way to worship the only true God. Because there are so-called gods in this world, and we are called to not worship them, but to worship only the true Lord himself. Have a blessed day, Central, and may the Lord protect you.